Okay. You guys hear me all right up at the top? Thumbs up. Okay, so now after that introduction, how many of you are familiar with Jive Communications? Yes! Making progress. Being an entrepreneur is the best occupation in the entire world. I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys about that. How many people here, I understand there's people who are in the lecture series and a lot who are not. So raise your hand if you're in the lecture series.
This is the lecture series.
So everybody here.
All majors across campus, some are entrepreneurial minded, some are not major. This is the entrepreneurial.
Okay, perfect. And how many, let's see, I'll get to that in a second. So I'm, again, CEO and co-founder in Jive Communications. We provide business telephone service in the cloud. And we are the largest private company of our kind in the U.S. We started out right up the street in Orem and have stuck around ever since. A lot of people don't know about us because we provide phone service to businesses all across the U.S. and we haven't had a real focus locally, but we're up to about 500 employees. We're closing in on 100 million in revenue, and the co-founding team kind of put this thing together in 2006. So before I get into, and I'm going to kind of speak in general about the journey that I took. And so, if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them out as I go along. But I've got a confession to make. I've got a sort of a dirty secret, and that is I still have 2 classes left at BYU towards my management degree. It's been weighing on me pretty heavily here as I've been planning to be here. Hopefully I get invited back to participate here.
You get to finish your class?
Yeah, exactly. Get invited back to class. What's even worse is that it was the lecture series, and back then, what was it, 03, 04, something like that. It was the lecture series that kind of gave me the conviction and kind of helped me understand, I guess, who I was. It gave me the conviction to kind of just move in, start a business, and sort of never really look back. So yeah, I probably won't get invited back here until I finish those classes. But that is a little bit of my history. I've been in your seat here, and pretty excited to be able to talk about my journey. Here's what you can expect from me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the story. I think there's so many lessons in just kind of the path that you take. Sometimes it feels random, but you learn as you go. You can never really plan everything in advance. So I'll talk about the lessons that I learned. I've got the secret of entrepreneurial success, and then accessibility is something that's really key to me. It's fun to be on stage and talk about all the great things that happen. It's even more fun, though, to talk with people about their business, to talk about the context that they're in, to talk about maybe the decisions that they're looking to make. If you guys have ideas for businesses or products or things that you're kind of mulling over, please feel free to reach out. It's really enjoyable for me. I've been blessed beyond my wildest dreams. It's a privilege to be able to chat with young entrepreneurs. I do it all the time. Find me on LinkedIn, John Pope at Jive, pretty easy. My email is john@jive.com, and I'm excited to make a bunch of friends from this event here. So it's a little what I'm about. Oh, and don't hate me if I try to sell you the best phone system in the world. There's going to be some awesome businesses that come from the folks in this crowd here. Would love to help each other out. All right, raise your hand if you already know you're already planning to be a full-time entrepreneur after graduation. Notice I said after graduation.
Well done.
Okay, raise your hand if you plan to have a day job with your own business on the side and sort of ease into it. Okay, maybe about twice as many in that group? Okay, raise your hand if you plan to gain experience in the job market first and just wait and then pick your time to start a business later. Okay, another decent amount. Software engineers, where are you guys at? Not a ton of them. What type of things are standing in your way or making you hesitant? I want to know kind of where I need to go as I talk about my path. Anybody want to shout out things that are kind of making you nervous or making you hesitant? Way up at the top.
Getting bank loans.
Bank loans, yeah, funding. Middle?
Can you talk more about private funding, how you were able to stay private?
Yeah, that's a big part of our story right here.
Is nailed down my business model.
Business model, okay, working on that. Marketing. I got my CMO over here, Matt Peterson. You want to raise your hand here, Matt? Matt's available.
We need to find the same number.
Chief Marketing Officer. Thank you. Another one up there. Uncertainty in kind of in taking the leap or uncertainty. Okay. Maybe one more here.
Unsure about what education I need or don't need to achieve my goals.
Okay. You need to get your management degree for sure. How many classes you got left? Okay. All right, good. So you guys are kind of generally in the same place that I was when I was in the class. Let me talk a little bit about my partner in crime. And this is really important, especially where you guys are at right now. You know, we've got 5 kids when we were at BYU. When I was in this class, we had 1. It was our oldest now. He's 14. He was just a baby. My wife used to take him to class. And so as you're trying to figure out if you're going to take this leap, you know, one of the hesitations was uncertainty. Not really sure if you're going to, you know, jump into it or not. You've got to be able to sync with your significant other, with your spouse. I mean, how many people here are married? Yeah. So you guys are kind of in a similar spot. And it's so important that that you get on the same page before you potentially make this jump. My wife's nervous because she saw the next slide here. My wife, so we both come from the Seattle area, and we would hang out at school. I came to school most of the time, I think. That was a joke about attendance. I'm a bad example, so just ignore that. I would see her all the time, and she'd always be with her boyfriend. And you know, he was a good guy. I always thought, you know, that's kind of annoying that I'm always running in. You know, I can't even try to steal her away because he's always there. And then I found out that he hadn't gone on his mission yet, and so that was great. And I kind of learned one of my first lessons, which was some problems just take care of themselves, right? You don't have to work that hard or like rack your brain on it. So thank you to the Mexico City mission for taking care of that problem for me. But then other problems were coming down the path. I was planning on going to sell pest control that summer, and then her ex-boyfriend was going to come back from his mission. And another lesson, this one I took with me, some opportunities require quick action. So I liquidated my E-Trade account, and I bought her a ring, and the rest is history. I'm going to get back to this in a little bit, but it is kind of more on the personal side, and on the spiritual side. You absolutely have to be in sync with your spouse if you're going to take this path, because there's a lot of uncertainty. Okay, let's talk real quick about entrepreneurial traits. Any ideas? Persistency, ambition. What else? What helps you if you're... Risk, yes. Adaptability. Resourceful. These are all great. All right, one more. Creativity. Yeah. I've got a few of them down here. Visionary. You're maybe a bit of a dreamer. We imagine how the world is going to be in several years, and then we get to fight to try to build it. Good at managing risk. Comfortable with the unknown and ambiguity. You might not actually know what your decision is going to be until you get enough information, and that can be a little bit stressful. Good business instincts. You can't really teach this, but a lot of great entrepreneurs have that. And then support from family and significant other. It's important to know that if this is kind of you might have the temperament to run your own business. If you're not okay with risk, if you have a rough time with the unknown, with a little bit of the unpredictability, then that might be a sign that you should think a little bit more about it. Getting back to this, why is it important to have support from your spouse? If you're an entrepreneur, why does this matter? Fail a lot. Yeah. You fail a lot. I mean, that's stressful, and it's something that people should anticipate.
Not going to be a 9-to-5 work schedule.
Not going to be a 9 to 5. Yes. Oh man, the 2 a.m. Pulling into the driveway at 2 a.m. is not the funnest, but it's happened a ton to me.
She can help problem solve.
Help problem solve? Yeah, that's true.
You might not know where the next paycheck's coming from.
Yeah, that's this stuff that you guys have it.
Business investment is something that's like some money you have to take out of your personal finances.
A lot of times early on, you keep your finances, I guess you keep your personal cost of living so low so that you can maximize the chance that your business is going to be successful. And that can be stressful on the family. Depends on what the expectations are. So you talk about it ahead of time and make sure that they're okay being along for the ride. Now, coming back to the lecture series here. A lot of my classes, from what I remember, were preparing me to be a great employee. Were preparing me to, kind of rise up the ladder, to interview well, to sharpen up my skills. It was the lecture series that, and I had kind of, I had always had businesses, kind of on the side when I was growing up. My parents were always they always had a small business going on, and so I really enjoyed it, but it didn't really have, I guess, the validation as a career path until I hit the lecture series, and then I kind of learned about all of these, kind of heroes to me, these people who had gone out and gone on this adventure, created life as they envisioned it, and came back to tell their story. And so it was this class here, and honestly, I haven't even been back since. It was this class that really gave me the courage, and so I talked with Marissa about it, and I think I was off cycle a little bit. I had a couple of classes left in spring term in 2004. I had been door knocking for a couple of summers and had a lot of success with it, and we had a bunch of friends that wanted to do that as well. And so I kind of, I guess, talked with her about it, and we came to a joint decision. And so I'm going to talk about my first stop here. South Star Satellite, we did Dish Network sales and installation. And since I had done sales in the prior summers, I knew, and this was kind of what made me comfortable with it, I knew that if all of my salespeople were terrible, that at least I could go out and make some money for the family. And another piece of it is that I would pay 100% commission, so there really wasn't a whole lot of startup cost involved in this. And so why was this a perfect first business? Low startup cost, I could fall back to sales if needed, and it provided income while bootstrapping Jive. I kept it going, even though Jive started back in '06. I kept this thing going to provide income so that we didn't have to take income out of Jive because there wasn't any. And so just, I guess, the high level here, we got into sales. The summer ended. I needed more income, and I eventually worked into an installation contract with Dish Network. And I even became a satellite dish installer for a while. I mean, you never really know where the path is going to take you. And so during the winters, we would do the installations and then do sales in the summer.
John, what do you call bootstrapping for business?
Bootstrapping, perfect, thank you. Bootstrapping is just a huge part of our story. What that means is to, and I've actually got a slide on this, but it's to start up a business with little to no capital. Pretty straightforward. When you hear bootstrapping, that's what that means. And a lot of people have to do it because, and as the gentleman up there mentioned, it's hard to sometimes have funding to get the bank to lend you money. The bank didn't want to lend me money until I didn't need it. And that's kind of a common story. So yeah, thanks for that. Lessons that came out of this, and one of the guys that came and lectured us in the Entrepreneurship series was, and I don't remember his name or anything, it's just that what he told me, he said that when you get into running your own business, there will be times where you will be completely on the moon. You'll be excited about what you're doing. You'll feel like you can conquer anything. And then there will be other times where you are absolutely terrified and you're staying up at night. You can't sleep. You don't know what you're going to do. You're questioning whether this is even you. And that happened. It was right out of the gate where we started selling a ton, and then we had an issue with funding all of the equipment that we needed to put out. I ran into an issue where I couldn't even make payroll one of the pay periods, and just right out of the gate. And that's something that'll happen to you over and over again. It taught me how to kind of pick myself up off the ground and stay, I guess, steady and continue to believe that we could pull it off. Taught me how to run an actual business. You guys have skills in here that you're picking up from your classes. You get out there, you start applying this stuff, and from bookkeeping to marketing, if you do run a small business, I consider it an extension of my education. And I don't know if I can get actual credit for that. I mean, had to ask. But this taught me how to run a business. How to bootstrap. Here we go. So just in a nutshell, there's probably a lot more to this, but I've done it 3 times here. My co-founders have done it as well. So you keep your personal income as low as possible. You don't expect to maybe, look, I'll admit something else. I'm 39 years old. I still haven't purchased a house for my wife yet. I mean, that's kind of rare, and I feel bad, and I did buy her a piece of land. We are going to build this year. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said that, I guess. You keep your personal income as low as possible. You're not living at the same standard as maybe your parents were when you left the house. It's just kind of, how bad do you want it? How much sacrifice are you willing to make? And my wife, I mean, she gets so much credit for this. Well, I don't know how much we lived off of that first business. We were making a lot more. We could have had a better standard of living. We probably made it off of $1,500 a month. I mean, it was nuts. This small apartment. We just kept everything financially tight. In your business, and this is sort of general again, but you reinvest in sales, leads, and product, things that are going to drive revenue. You want to get to revenue as quickly as you can for the most part. Revenue, adoption, whatever you want to call it. And you might outsource stuff like marketing, legal, and HR. So, and as revenue climbs, then you increase budget for these other things. You go to product and support. You want to make sure that your customer satisfaction is where it needs to be. Then you kind of slide into finance, and HR, marketing, and legal, and these other things that you've been outsourcing for a while. So there it is in a nutshell. Again, it doesn't apply in every single case, but that is kind of maybe a rule of thumb on how to get something launched when you don't have the funding. Taught me about landing a large deal. Landing Dish Network is a story in itself as far as the installation side goes. I won't get into that. Taught me how to recruit. You always want to try to go for referrals whenever you can. We still do this. In fact, I don't even know right now any open position at Jive where we're not trying to find referrals first. I've got Paul Thatcher, my HR director, here as well. He can attest to that. The best people are the people who your employees already can vouch for. Taught me about the reseller world. Sometimes a great way to get your product out there, if it's a physical product or service, or sometimes if it's software, is to tap into people who already sell to the same market that you sell to. Taught me to decide whether this was going to be a lifestyle business. I decided to take this and flip it into the next two businesses and go for something greater as opposed to just, we could have had a really good income living off of this business. And then as I moved into these other businesses, turning it over to a manager. You've got to have somebody you trust, and you've got to give them equity in your business so that they feel like it's theirs. Otherwise, things are going to go south. Taught me a bit about business development. One thing I learned here, I learned how to land the big deal, but then ultimately what kind of sent this whole thing south was that I hired somebody who said that they were quitting from Dish Network, my customer. Well, they said they were quitting, but they hadn't quit yet, and Dish was kind of twerked about it at me. And so, that was one of the things that I learned from and didn't do again. It's funny, we just had one of our vendors just hire one of our employees, and it kind of made me feel the same way. I don't know why, but it's a lesson that you got to learn at some point. Danger of relying on one customer. So when that relationship goes south, then what's your business? And that's why it ended in 2009. I love that first business, but it relied on seasonality. There were ups and downs. We were getting one-time revenue, and I'd always dreamed of having something that was more consistent, I could be more methodical with, and so I opened up an insurance agency to learn about residual income. Residual income is tougher to build, but then it's easier to keep, and you're able to predict a lot better because you know that this stuff is coming month in and month out. So we were able to grow very quickly. We were the fastest growing AmFam agency for over 5 years. We got it up to $500K in recurring revenue. Again, this would have been an awesome business to live off of if we wanted to run a lifestyle business. And it also provided income while we bootstrapped with Jive. And then I turned it over to managers to focus more exclusively on Jive. Already talked about the lesson of bootstrapping, talked about residual, good process and specialization. This is key. One of the main differences between a small business and a large business is processes. And in a small business, I've seen a ton of them. A lot of times what happens is people all have it up here. They're trying to perform 10 different roles. They don't have their processes documented. They're not specializing in one specific thing. If you're able to get your process down, then you're able to kind of look at the different pieces and hire people who are specialists in each one of those. And your business is not relying on one person and how well they remember the business. It's relying on a process that you continue to refine and you plug in the right people. And it's always, in my opinion, it's always better to have people specialize, just focus instead of run around doing a bunch of different things. And every one of you that starts a business, or nearly every one of you, is going to run into this. because at first you're wearing 19 different hats, and you've got to keep yourself kind of delegating, hiring, and replacing yourself with specialists. Question?
At what point does it become worth it to hire someone else?
That is a question that may go back to your business instincts. It's an excellent question. We battled this out. I remember when we... Oh, sorry, yeah. At what point do you hire somebody in your business? At what point do you know? Well, you probably have to have the revenue to cover that person. And I would imagine that it's probably got to be a position that can bring more revenue to, replace and have you continue to hire. That's why I talk about being quick to revenue and putting more of your focus into sales and growth and leads. These are all things that create additional revenue. So it kind of feeds on itself. If you were to grow to a certain point and you got enough money for an employee and you choose to hire somebody maybe in legal, well, that person probably isn't going to be bringing more business, and then you might be stuck. So you kind of get to a point where you see your revenue, you know you can afford to bring somebody else on, and early on, you really push towards bringing somebody who's going to bring you more growth. Later on, as you're dealing with, you're working on refining the product, or maybe, hiring the right people is more of an issue. I mean, Paul, when did we bring you on? I think it was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. So we must have been at like 30, 40 something million in revenue. Now, that's not exactly the right time, but you can see that's the path that we took. Is there another question over here?
Yeah, so when the businesses were kind of running themselves and you hired management to kind of do the day-to-day, do you still hold equity in those businesses, or do you sell them?
Now, what I did with them is that I had them on kind of a revenue share. So it was kind of like equity. I didn't give them equity. They were LLCs. It's easier to do it this way. But they had a share, a certain percentage every year of the revenue that would come in. And so it's kind of, I guess it's similar to equity.
But you would keep the majority, right?
Yeah, in those situations. Yeah. And I only turned those over again because they were small businesses and I was kind of able to do that. This one lasted until 2014. I probably sold maybe 30 policies and then turned it over, and last I was really there was again 2006. We'll do another question here.
Did you say you physically documented the process?
Yeah.
What was the reason?
Well, I wanted it to be okay. So, did we physically document our processes? Did we put them down on paper? And the answer is yes. And it's because if things start to go wrong, you want to go back to your formula. You don't want to have to just figure it out on the fly why something went wrong. If a customer, didn't have an email answered, then you go back to the part of the process that's covered there, and you can say, here's the specific role, and this was the time that you were supposed to cover those. What happened here? And you can deal with it. And then if there's an issue where this person was off doing some other important thing, then you fix your process. So absolutely, and I wish that I had been as good at that throughout my entire career. It's a tough thing to have discipline to do, but it's absolutely the way or critical to scaling a business. So excellent question. In fact, now if I'm talking to somebody that has a small business, even before they get out of the gate, I say, document your entire process. Document the whole flow. What happens to a customer, what happens to the product, what are the different parts, the handoff points with your potential employees. Take everything in your brain and put it on paper. And it's going to change because you're not going to get it right the first time. But if you start somewhere, then you can, every single time there's a problem, you can go and refine your process. So, keep moving here. We had one vertical market that we had about 70% of our customers in. It was the Russian-speaking market, and these guys were great for our growth. Referred And that's what happens when you get into a vertical. And part of bootstrapping, I would say with an asterisk, is you pick a certain vertical, a certain niche to focus on. Because you can be really good in one small area. If you're early on, you can't be the best everywhere. So you got to, you have to consider going after one small market, and we did that. We had tons of referrals coming in. We eventually didn't even have to do any marketing. The tough part with this was there was some insurance fraud rings that were happening that caused our loss ratio to kind of go in the toilet, and ultimately that's what ended this business, was the over-reliance on one market. And I've gone through that a couple of times in different chapters. Attrition. You got to make your customers happy. If you're in a residual business, in insurance, they would call this terminal policy count, where you're losing as many customers as you're growing. And in any residual-based business, you're going to want to focus on customer service so that you never even come close to losing the amount of customers that you're gaining each month, because it gets tougher and tougher. You got a $100 million business. Well, you're losing a bunch, even at like 1% attrition. You're losing a bunch of those. So, something to keep in mind.
Hey, John,
Yep.
8 or 9 businesses.
Okay. Let me blast through some of this stuff. Jive. When we came together for Jive, there were several co-founders that each were involved in different businesses and needed a phone system, needed something that was better than the on-site hardware that was costing $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 at the time. And we looked into implementing a software-based solution. Nobody was talking cloud back then, but it was a hosted software-based solution, a multi-tenant solution where no matter where you're at, you could be connected into this same telephone system. We all needed it for our different businesses, and the co-founders that I teamed up with, these guys were extremely talented with software. They came from a software shop. And when we came together, and this is kind of the magic, I guess, of Jive, is that we came together. I had more experience on the growth side, and these guys had a ton of experience on the software development side. And our vision was that this was going to take over. Telephone systems were going to be cloud-based in the future. We believed it so strongly. We kind of went ahead. I don't think we didn't have a whole lot of like scientific vetting for it, but it worked for our businesses, and we decided that the market was going to love it. We didn't have any early funding. It was all bootstrapping. We did kind of the same things I've talked about before. We built a reseller program. We built a K-12 vertical program that's been great for us. We avoided relying on one large customer and avoided relying on just one niche. And we didn't pay ourselves, at least, I think for 5 years, we paid ourselves either nothing or like $1,000, $2,000. We were living off spouse income, or we were living off our other business income as well. We ended up we skipped that question earlier, we skipped the entire venture capital funding stage. And VCs want to make a bunch of different bets, but only maybe 1 in 10 pay off, and they pay off in a huge way. If you get larger before you've taken funding or much funding, growth equity is a type of funding that you can take where the investors they pick winners that are just ready to scale, ready to get larger, and they expect every single one of them to be successful and bring the return that they're looking for. So that's what we did, as opposed to going the VC route. We've kept a majority stake. Northbridge Growth Equity has a minority stake with us. We've achieved in our industry a bunch of milestones here in terms of customer satisfaction, NPS, uptime, revenue, large average account size. It's just been an incredible ride. We're extremely fortunate to be where we're at. I'm going to blast through some of these lessons here. Write down NPS. Study that if you can. NPS is an excellent way to make sure that your product and your processes, your customer support is in the right spot to grow a healthy long-term business. I won't get into that anymore, but please look it up. It's one of the main metrics that we like to keep track of. Talked about fundraising a little bit, learned about running a board of directors, did about 6 acquisitions. That's another one. When you guys get interested in that, feel free to reach out. And then building the right culture. This one's huge. You want people there. I hate to use the word entitlement. There are a lot of people, and I can think of so many disasters with hiring that have to do with somebody being kind of selfish. What's in it for them? They're always comparing to other employees. They're not team-oriented. Again, my time's running out. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but you have to find people that believe in the cause and are there to help other people. And you'll get really good at knowing the difference, because as soon as you hire somebody who is in it kind of for themselves and comparing themselves and takes too many breaks and leaves at 4:42, you'll know, and it becomes a real pain. I mentioned these are the metrics that we keep most track of, that we have our eyes on. Growth, NPS, and then everybody. There's a book called Traction that talks about everybody in the organization having a number, and that allows you to have accountability across your entire team. I would do this right from the start. And then scaling. I had some stories I was going to tell you. You can ask Matt when he almost got in a fist fight with a customer. Seems like a lot of these stories are around people exiting the business. But this is something you can reach out. Again, John Pope, LinkedIn. Feel free. I'm sure there are a ton of other questions, and hopefully we get to a bunch of them in the next session. But you got to be in context to really get a lot of this stuff right. The secret to being a great entrepreneur. And before I do that, I want to say thanks to my, Matt's the co-founder that's here, but I want to say thanks to him and the other co-founders for allowing me to be a part of the team. It's been an incredible ride, and this is me sharing my story. They've each got their own. Secret to being a great entrepreneur is real-world practice. Find some mentors and get out there and try it. There is nothing that can replace the things that I learned every single day, thousands of little things that I picked up along the way. I couldn't have predicted that my path would end up in software-based phone service, but it did, and you got to get out there and try it at some point. However, stay in school, kids. Finish your degree. Don't be like me. All right. Thank you.